We had dinner with Grandma just about every Sunday. Grandma's raviolis were legendary, and in a predominantly Irish Catholic and Northern European community where we lived in Federal Way, we were considered, without a doubt, the strangest people on the block. We would walk into the house and you could smell stuff simmering and it was delicious. And then she'd put down the salami and the peppers and the provolone and all that stuff, and you'd really sneak into the kitchen to see if you could taste the sauce. One of her great lines when you walk into the kitchen, I remember, always, because you could go in there and you would try to sneak a little taste in. After 2 tastes of something, she was very kind about it. She said, the 3rd taste is actually eating. So she would make the dough, and then she would roll it out, just like I learned in Bologna, which is with the mattarello, the rolling pin. And she did the same thing, that although I didn't remember it until I got to Bologna, but you would take the rolled out dough, and then you would roll it over itself, and as you spun it, as you hit it, it would stretch it. And that, I remember being perplexed when I first saw that in Emilia-Romagna, outside of Bologna, because I always thought, well, if you're pressing on it, why isn't it just re-adhering to itself? But it's because you floured each layer delicately.
I'm sprinkling flour on it so it won't stick to my roller. And you go from side to side to roll it out.
So she would roll out the whole sheet, and then she would take a yardstick and she would measure it halfway.
I mark my dough so it's halfway.
And she would make a little dent. And then she'd put the yardstick away, she'd brush it off with her little funny brush, and she'd put all of the filling on half, the lower half toward her. Then she would roll it back over to her.
And roll it right on top.
And then she had another rolling pin that had the little square, and the raviolis were about maybe an inch and a quarter big. And she would roll the pin over them, and they would form the shapes and press the filling into the little squares, separating kind of where the walls were, or where the ending point was. And then she would cut them with the little spinny, wheelie thing.
And I take this cutter, and I go along like this.
And she measured them, I think it was like 500, which was enough for the meal that we were at, depending on how many people were us, and then a couple of meals after that. And she would send us home with a bag of frozen raviolis. Unbeknownst to me, you know, when I was young, we were always doing traditional stuff. It was always for us an amazing gastronomic delight, but we didn't really put it together that it was tradition that we were following. And, you know, Christmas Eve was always fish. She always did shrimp, and she always did some kind of calamari or scungili, and they were all part of her grand design. And we didn't necessarily see the repetition, but that was what she was celebrating, was the repetitive nature of traditional dishes. She would bring a big pot of boiling water to the point, and I remember this very clearly, to the point that the entire house had steamed windows. And then she would drop them in, she would heat up the sauce, and my favorite one was the oxtail ragu. She would take them out of the water and never, ever rinse them. The ravioli always went in the sauce, tossed in that, and then put on the plate just like that. Just like we eventually learned was the way the real Italians did it. And the thing that strikes me most about her memory was how pure and unequivocal her technique was compared to what I learned when I finally and eventually moved to Italy and saw how things were done in kind of the home kitchen-y restaurants that I worked at. So it was something that further kind of enhanced my memory of her abilities, because I'm sure if you asked her, she wouldn't say she was a chef. She was a cook at home, and she made stuff for her family. But her technique was immutably and unassailably the same perfect technique that we use in restaurants to this day, which is something that's kind of cool.